IVM.
We'd like to thank Storytel for sponsoring this show. Storytel is an audiobook platform that lets you hear hundreds of thousands of stories on your mobile, PC, wherever you prefer. Now, generally, Storytel is a great deal at $2.99 a month for an unlimited number of books, but for our listeners, we've got something special. The first month for IVM listeners is now just $99. That's an insane deal. It's $200 off the first month. To start you off, let me recommend one of my favorite books, Range, How Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. This is a book by David Epstein and is one of the most thoughtful books I've read recently. He talks about early specialization and why that's not necessarily the best way to go in a modern world where problems are not always simple and viewing them from multiple lenses are helpful. In the Indian context where we're forced to choose science, commerce, or arts in the 10th standard, I think this is particularly applicable and it's a great read. So go to storytel.com/IVM, go get your first month at just $99 and check out Range by David Epstein. Great read.
Welcome to Absolutely Right, the first graphology-based podcast show in India. I'm your host, Aditi Surana. I am a graphologist and a high-performance coach. Back in 2004, nobody believed me when I said I want to become a professional handwriting analyst. Many people thought this is just a hobby and I will leave this work in 2 to 3 years. I knew people who did it as their hobby, but it was impractical to look at it as a full-time career at that time. Thankfully, I met a few people, including our guest on today's Absolutely Right episode, who looked at my madness, sensed my passion, and encouraged it. As they say, it takes one to know one. A writer, creative director, and programming head for Radio City, independent ad filmmaker and producer Ravi Iyer became an entrepreneur in 2006 and launched his production house called Talkoholic Productions. I met Ravi for the first time in the Radio City office where I did my first graphology-based radio show. Today, after 13 years, I'm analyzing his handwriting again. And he has a loaded question for me. Based on his old writing sample and the new writing sample, he wants me to talk about how he has evolved over these years. As you listen to the episode, do check out our new segments on the show, Autograph Please, where I describe how exactly the guest is understood or misunderstood by people around them, and Graphology Tool of the Week, where I will be talking about why Cyrus Brocha famously gets in trouble with authority. To make the most of this episode, keep a notepad handy. Either look at your own natural way of writing or scribble a few lines for you to look at some fascinating facts of your personality based on the writing strokes. Today I will be talking about something called variable slant, where your handwriting moves to the left and to the right at the same time. Disconnected writing, or as they call it, printed writing, and challenges of a creative person. Ravi will join us on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Once again, just a quick reminder, please do help us out by filling out our survey. It's at ivmpodcast.com/survey. It really does help us figure out who's listening and, what are the characteristics that we can go and push to advertisers. That is massively helpful to us. Please, please, please do help out with that. So, on the network this week, let me start with a quick milestone. It's the 100th episode of Begin the Journey with Ashish Vidyarthi. Congratulations to Ashish and the team. Great show. If you're not listening to it, he talks to you about just how to approach life. It's just very, very cool stuff. Do check this out. Want to mention the note with Maruk Inayat. She talks about why petrol prices are so high. On the Wire Talk, Siddharth speaks with Harsh Mandar. On Advertising is Dead, Varun speaks to Kabir Biswas, the founder of Dunzo. They have a really interesting conversation about, what's the future of Dunzo and what they're thinking about. On the Traveling Professor's Diaries, check out Siddharth talk about the performance paradox. I found it really fascinating and interesting. I think that you guys will really get something out of listening to that. Please do give that a listen. And finally, let me mention Zindagi Diaries. It's Ragini Kumar's poetry podcast. The first week when it came out, we put out 5 poems first week. We put out another 5 poems this week, and the response has been phenomenal. Do check it out. It's in Hindi. It's a poetry podcast. Something a little different. Do give it a shot and let us know what you think. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
So today I have my friend Ravi Iyer with me, and I know Ravi from 2006 into the Radio City office back in the day and coming up with this idea of doing a radio show based on handwriting. And initially I felt that all of you indulged me. You're just like, okay, new kid on the block, let's see what she's doing, what she's up to. But it was amazing to do the very first radio show based on graphology. So Ravi, what was your first impression when you heard about graphology?
So honestly, Aditi, imagine doing graphology on radio. So like you rightly said, we probably indulged you a little is what even I think it was. And I think Harsh was very gung-ho about doing this on air. So, I am the sort of guy who likes to experiment a lot. And
Right.
radio is a medium to experiment. So what if you're talking something that's visual? Why couldn't we describe it and talk to people? That was my intention. And when I met you first, I am a guy who's very cynical about everything. You know that for a fact. So my whole attitude to the whole thing was, let's make some interesting content. And as we went forward, as you would explain that, this is a scientific process. And honestly, I would think, graphology can be a scientific process, even if I were to leave aside my cynicism for a minute and take a look at it. That factually speaking, you can analyze a person's psychology based on his handwriting. I mean, it makes sense. It is not so without sense. There definitely must be something to it.
Today you've sent me handwriting samples from 1986.
89.
And
89
then,
was the first one.
And then other samples through the process, through these years. And the question is very, very difficult. I'm supposed to talk about how you have changed over these years. It's not only that you have changed, which you have, but how exactly you have,
Because
evolved
I would love
as a
to know
person.
this, because if you could figure that out, because I can't figure it out myself. So it would be
You
very
shouldn't.
nice.
If you
No, I mean-
become that analytical, there is a problem.
Yeah, I'm not that analytical. I don't bother much.
So let me jump in, and I remember the handwriting sample that you had given me. Also, because you were not willing, no matter how much other people told you and nudged you to get it, give it a shot. You are like not willing to do that. And after many months, one day you said, okay, I think I would like you to look at my handwriting. And I almost felt that was my achievement. Finally, Ravi is convinced to show his handwriting. And you wrote with a specific pen. So tell us about your pen relationships. Like you are very, very particular about it.
Evolved over the years. There are a lot more pens now. And
Okay.
I used to preferably write with one fountain pen only. And I used to not part with it to anybody. So now there are several fountain pens that I've picked up. Some of them, the one which I used to write with is still there. The better fountain pen that I believe. That's for around 13 years now. And this pen has been with me for only a year or so. I've been smoothing it and writing with it. So I feel the analytic side of writing for me can be done with any pen. But when I get down to the creative side of writing, I like to use a particular pen or a kind of way of writing. So when I'm writing something on the creative side, I do not like ruled lines at all, because it sort of restricts your mental strength of thinking, So I like unruled sheets of paper, and I may write all over the place. And I prefer to write with a fountain pen in most cases. And like I said, I have a specific fountain pen which I write with when it comes to creative writing.
I can't agree with you more for 2-3 reasons. First of all, people prefer unruled paper. They are very, very creative. And if you know that any time I ask people to create a handwriting sample, I insist on writing on an unruled paper so that your mind can go anywhere. And that's what I think your thriving point is. I'm very surprised that you figured it out on your own. Second thing is people who use ink pens and who love the ink flowing and the thickness of the impression that it makes. It talks about how you love to indulge in every experience. So these people are more sensory. They love to go and experience the textures and nuances of the voice or music that they listen to. If they're talking about food, they would talk about the minute flavors. Now that all is applicable to you with that simple choice of what kind of writing instrument that you use. And yes, Graphology has all of this. So Ravi, as I look at your handwriting sample from this current phase, which you wrote today morning, one of the most important things that come to my mind right now is how focused you have become. Like I remember you from 2006 and you were really, obviously you were creative, you are even now, but that time you were more exploratory. You picked up things and you jumped into them and you wanted to figure it out. Now it is more about having a specific direction and also making sure that you do not move away from what you have decided or a kind of plan of action. Is it part of growing up for you?
In a way, I think now I'm 52, so I had to grow up to some level at some point of time. So somewhere what happened is, the maturity does kick in, and you do realize that you can't just keep. Anyway, I still do write a lot of ideas which don't see the light of day, but I keep them aside for what they are worth, and I move on to something else. So there are two sides to what I do. There's an execution side. So when I get down to executing, I don't bother about wondering whether is it optimal or whatever. A lot of people get into the zone of it's not creative enough yet, and that will never happen.
Yes.
So I would rather run with it the way it is. We've also, in the last 10 years or so, when we make corporate films, very often a client comes to us with a prototype of a product and he says, shoot this. And he's not even aware of what to say for it. So there may not be a script at all. And we evolved into making a place in such a way. So I have my own audio setup. I have the voiceover. We do the scripting on the fly very often. And there are very few organizations who could do that. So we have our own team of people. So that sort of opens up certain things. And this happened a couple of times with me. In the initial stage of my career, I used to write, let's say, if I wrote lyrics for a jingle, I used to work with a gentleman called Ashok Patki. And Ashok Patki would produce whatever you wrote in a certain way.
Okay.
And then in the later years, I started working with a guy called Rajat Dholakia, who's known as Juku. And he has a tendency to throw everything out of the window. He'll pick up one line from what you've written and say that this is a hook line. And now let's go forward and redo this whole thing. So the moment I started working with him, I realized that it's an evolution process. So then I'm not going to sit and worry about what I have written. I will junk everything and rewrite everything. So at present times, if I'm an executioner, if I am a producer or a director, I'm no more a writer. So there will be a writer who does the writing and let him deal with the problems of the writing. And I will see to it that the execution side of things, when you are in the flow of things, it has to go in a particular way. I take care of that and I don't bother about that. So I've been able to sort of demarcate those areas.
I remember telling you this last time, and that is applicable even today, that you are highly intuitive. So when people write in disconnected style, it talks about their ability to perceive way more than what is available in the moment. And that is a skill, that is a gift. It has other side of making the person disorganized. You cannot be completely planned and intuitive. Very rarely that happens. So what I see as a transformation over these years, you have literally picked up that perception or ability to see things, I think way beyond what meets the eye, but bring it to your execution and make very practical decisions, which is very interesting to look at, which I think is the biggest shift. If I have to compare both handwritings that you have sent, that is the biggest shift here, that you are perceptive, but you do not give into your perception to a point where you become excessively creative or excessively impatient about moving things forward.
Sure. Sounds good.
Any specific questions you have for me that I dig into?
So I don't know, since we met around 13 years back, we would have had that talk when I was thinking of shifting, and typically when a person comes to a point in life where you are shifting for a change, a large change in my case, that I was going to give up a job completely. It wasn't a job in my case, a corporate career, and move on to start something on my own. So obviously at that point of time, I had no idea where I was headed, because I had no clue that this is what I would be headed to. So in the initial stages, I dabbled with training people, did a whole lot of other things, and then settled in to be a producer, director or whatever. Even today, there are some things which I am exploring. So suddenly now we will probably move into making feature films, and it won't be only short films or corporate films alone.
Wow.
So there's a lot that is happening. And what I want to know is that, see, you've seen a lot of people's careers. I don't know how many people's handwritings you've analyzed over the period of time. The reason why I shared that was also to figure out, for a lot of people, they can't see it themselves. The change in you is so gradual. So it's like the frog which is put in boiling water. If you put it in boiling water, suddenly it'll die. But if you increase the temperature slowly, the frog does not know that the water is boiling. So the water may have come to a boil now, but it's been simmering for a very long time. So it eventually comes to a boil, So the pandemic has probably brought the water to a boil.
True.
So you tell me. I mean, I would rather openly accept whatever you say, because you can read a lot more from that. And that's the intention. I want to know what you have to say.
So when we look at walking into a situation with a focused approach, which is a new practiced behavior that you show, with that comes the evaluation of the risk that you are getting into. Sometimes you do get excited and you stretch yourself, you bend backwards, and you do take more risk than what you can handle. And that is something I definitely feel you should look at. Sorry?
Mm-hmm. Or more, I would say maybe stress rather than risk. In my case, the stress seems to be the bigger issue than the risk, because the risk is usually a little low. We don't seem to have too much of, we usually work more on commissioned projects. So factually speaking,
but Ravi, the risk might not be financial. Like financial is one way of looking at risk.
Emotional risk. There is more emotional risk.
I feel like it's moreover about the ability to take risk in terms of, do I want to do this project in the manner that I'm asked to? Do I have to do it last moment? Am I really feeling creative about it? All these emotional risks actually play even deeper in our minds most of the time. Second important aspect for you is you have to keep your imagination wide. If you're doing something and if you feel you got your way around it, you keep reinventing it or keep innovating it to the next level. And that may create, according to me, that creates your most conflicts with people. People are like, but you got the formula. Why are you trying it over and over again? You can just use the formula and go ahead with it. And you're like, no, but we did it the last time. Why do I have to repeat it? So this approach of constantly innovating your tried and tested methods do bring in the tremendous creativity that you bring to the project. But if people don't get it, you feel highly disappointed.
I think I've also moved on a little. But whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But obviously, if I look at myself 30 years back, the amount of experiments I used to carry 30 years back was a lot more than what I do now, very honestly. And
Ravi, now also there are too many. It's just that probably you have reduced your quantity, but not for normal human beings.
Correct. That's possible. So, but the experiments are more now on the basis of larger ideas. As in, there are multiple pipelines also that I may be toying with. It's not about trying multiple ideas for one thought. So, if a client is a sort who's very conservative and he says that, this is what I feel this is, I don't get bothered anymore. Earlier, I would be bothered by believing that, this needs to be done in this kind of a way and shouldn't be done in this way. Now I've reached a stage where I tell them that this is what is the ideal way of doing it. If you don't want to do it yourself, it's your funeral. Go ahead and do it. That's the way.
I would say another aspect of your stress right now is about withdrawing suddenly in the middle of whatever you're doing. So you require those breaks to internalize the process. And if you don't get those breaks, if you do not get to withdraw quickly, comfortably in the middle of the chaos, you feel you lose your perspective. So if you have to look at as a larger picture, it is that freedom that matters to you a lot. I think being a freelancer and then an entrepreneur gave you the ability and demand to do that, and which I feel is an important aspect which you should keep in mind always.
Sure.
So one thing which I want to talk about is when you write, your handwriting moves to the left and right, both the sides, if you have ever noticed. Yeah. So we call it slant, and we call it a slant which is leftward and rightward. For anybody who's listening to our show, if they have a writing which moves like that, that talks about your need to socialize with people and then suddenly withdraw and get into your own shell and then socialize again or connect with others and then have that space where no one knows what's happening inside your world. Now that dichotomy is confusing for people. And I remember having this conversation with you even 13 years ago. But this is an important aspect. People with the variable slant, the slant that goes both ways, require to know their balance. And most of the times you believe that people don't understand you. Like they don't get the expanse that you can become after working with you, after knowing you for many years. So the trick here is to really lower your expectations from others and actually train them to know you better. Unromantic as it may sound, but it is very crucial. And I believe all the relationships in which you have thrived, or your long-term relationships, you have invariably landed doing that. You actually held those concepts, and you help people understand what exactly you're doing and why you're doing it.
Sometimes it becomes an advantage too. You can always pretend to be moody and get away.
That's like a creative freedom like that.
Yeah. So a lot of times that people, when they get into the detailing, and if the detailing is very mundane or it doesn't, I find it very ridiculous, I don't even go into it. I just shut off.
Which is easier when it comes to your professional life. The bigger challenge here is about your personal life, which I was referring to. Because people get it professionally that you have your own style of working. Right. But when it comes to friendships and closer relationship, the expectations are such that people want you to behave in a certain manner. And being able to be the provider for their needs. And that time when you want to take your time, and which happens with many people with variable slant, that when they want to withdraw at that moment, it becomes a challenge. So the words like, I need my space for some time are very important to you. And if you kind of live by that, and if you create systems and train people around you, I meant specifically for this area. If you don't get your space, then any space that you walk into becomes intimidating, uncomfortable, or uninteresting for you. Okay, let's get into the next segment, Autograph Please, where I will be looking at your signature and talking about your public image and how people misunderstand you. But before I get there, I want to talk about your role as a parent and how you have been so closely associated with the autistic movement. I've always been very I would say, moved looking at Chitras and your work with other institutes and organizations. Please tell us more about it.
So, Shravan, our son is autistic, and he's now 22. He's non-verbal. So that again makes it a little different from autism where other adults are concerned. He's an adult, but cannot express a lot of things that he says or he would want to say. So most of it is manifested through gestures and pointing actions, and we understand him perfectly. Others may not understand him at all. So it suits us quite okay at present, but in the coming forward in the future, I guess we'll have to worry about that in a different way. So most people who have children with autism have a tough time in initial stages, especially to come to terms with the fact that their child has autism. And being a spectrum disorder, most people don't even know how wide that thing could go or what are the repercussions. So they usually, as a parent support group, we help them understand this better. There's a large body of parents working with us in that forum. It's called the Forum for Autism. And Sanjeev Kapoor has been a cause ambassador. Harsha Bhogle has been a cause ambassador. These are people also who have been helping us out. And it's been a very nice, comforting kind of space. Chitra has also been doing podcasts regarding special needs children and what are the things that they could require. So financials, for example. In our case, thankfully, we understood that the financials needed for a special needs person would be in a certain way. So, creating a trust or keeping aside money. These were things which we came to terms with quite early on, I think around 13, 14 years back. And everything started falling into place. So thankfully, Chitra has taken care of that aspect very well. Where the business side of things are concerned, at my end, I've had a zero debt policy for everything. So we don't build up any kind of debt. But we also believe in creating a legacy. So at the end of whatever period of time that we leave the world, there should be something ready and available for others to move on and experiment with as well. So the intention is that eventually probably we will create such a space where there will be other autistic individuals mixing, mingling, and interacting with regular people who would be running a business. And these people could be a part of that in a small way. So Shravan could be like a cause ambassador. He could be doing his own thing. He could just bring water to somebody who walks into the organization. Somebody else could be singing. Somebody could be dancing. There could be live events, all sorts of things. So that is the kind of vision we have for the place. Where we go, we'll figure out as we go.
And what is the name of Chitra's podcast?
So I think it's called the Special Needs Children Podcast.
If a parent is struggling with that, where can they find more information about this cause?
So first and foremost, the Forum for Autism has its own website as well. And apart from that, there is a lady called Priyanka in the Forum for Autism who's like an administration person. She would help out everybody. There's a telephone number. I'll give you the telephone number later. You can add that to the podcast as well. So people reach out to the forum as a parent support group. And there are lots of parents. It's not just one couple or something. There is a lady called Beena. Beena Modak was one of the founding members of the Forum for Autism. Extremely patient person, very soft-spoken, speaks Marathi, Hindi, all sorts of languages. So what happens is the people who need help are probably the larger segment of people who need help are probably those who may not be fluent in English. They may be people who do not have access to doctors, who do not have access to books, who may not even be able to read. So a lot of these parents help them out to understand these problems. So we also have doctors who are connected with us. There is Dr. Udani, there is Dr. Vibha Krishnamurthy. Then there is AFA, which is part of a Delhi chapter. There is Mary Barua, who also connects with us. So we have people across the world who are connected, sort of. There are children who have learning disabilities as well. And the parents are often struggling with trying to figure out what kind of a career can I choose for my child.
True.
What people don't realize is allow the child to be. Allow the child to choose a career or go with the flow. You know, that's an easier way of doing things. Why do you need to choose?
Ravi, I'm a dyslexic child myself. So I think if it were not for graphology as my career, I have no clue what I would have done, because most of the linear, regular things I struggle with. So I completely agree. And thank you for doing this, because career options are rare and where you can thrive and you can feel at home. So thank you for the work that you guys do. It's incredible to see the growth. So let's come to our autograph please segment. So sir, when we look at your autograph and when we look at how people perceive you, unlike most people who try to be something else in public, you are yourself in public. That creates more misunderstanding than one can imagine. People expect you to be a little bit more polished and do not say things that they don't want to listen to, or, you know, probably keep your opinions camouflaged, but you do not. So can you tell us something that happened because you just chose to be yourself and that didn't turn out very well?
There have been times when I've done the weirdest of things and I've gotten away with it, thankfully. The point is, I've come to a conclusion that even with clients, the people who are friends or who know you for being a frank person, you may be opinionated as long as, that opinion is about a certain it's for a reason. You know, they're willing to listen to you. And even if they don't listen to you at the end of the day, you can always turn around and say that you have a point of view which is different from my point of view. Let's take a middle road and work towards something. Where normal people are concerned, let's say friends are concerned, or I think also I've had the privilege of clients becoming friends and friends becoming clients, both ways, which could also be because of Shravan the way he is. So a lot of people who know us on the personal front realize that I'm not going to pretend come what may.
I must say, Ravi, that is one of the most endearing parts of your personality that I always felt. I felt you get Ravi for whatever he is and whether you like it or not, but he would be himself. And I think that's rare, and that is something that one must learn to cherish. And I'm not only talking on your behalf, I'm saying, other people should cherish people who have the courage to be themselves. So thank you so much for not molding into some corporate box that people demanded you to mold into, and, continue to be yourself.
So people have told me to mold into a corporate box several times. You've been to Radio City. There was an HR manager who came and told me that you've now been crowned the programming head. Now behave like a manager. So I said, look, I'm a creative person. And he wanted me to sit in the cabin. And that is the last thing I would want to do. So I would never be seen in my cabin. I used to be outside.
Ravi, but I must say that when people remain themselves in public situations, you have to pay a cost. Is that you have been willing to pay that cost, and you said, I'm okay living this life, which is not perfect according to others. So yes, there is a cost, but you're just willing to pay that cost.
Yeah, I think in my case, it's not much of a cost. Like, for example, if I have an electric car and somebody says, this guy moves around in an electric car. To me, that's the way I am. I don't need to move around in a big car. Like, I used to ride around on a bike, and I had a slip disc, and then I had to move on to a car. Otherwise, I wouldn't have moved to a car at all. Left to me, if I were as fit as I was 30 years back, I would be on a bicycle. I would have gone back to riding bicycles then, move around in a car at all. It's just that my fitness levels are so bad that I can't ride for more than 2 kilometers at one stretch. So, otherwise I would have been on a bicycle. Yeah.
Ravi, thank you so much for being part of our show. And this is so beautiful to see for me personally, the whole circle coming around and analyzing you after so many years and doing the comparison. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aditi.
Our minds are complex machines. In some ways, they're predictable to the T, and in others, you cannot rely upon your next thought. The question is, how to play this game with all you got? How do you give your best shot? I believe to make the most of it, you need to understand how to hack your own personality. And to do that better, let me introduce you to the Graphology tool of the week. Today, let's talk about this trait that I consider a mind block called defiance. If you haven't grabbed a pen and paper yet, this is the time to do that. Write this line. Kabir bought cakes and cookies. Let me repeat it. Kabir bought cakes and cookies. Use any ruled or unruled paper, doesn't matter. Just write it. Now, I believe you have written it. Now, observe the way you write your lowercase k. Not the capital letter in Kabir, but the lowercase letter k in cake and cookies. If the lowercase k looks like the uppercase k, then the writer shows defiance in his writing. Is it clear? If the capital K and small k, lowercase k looks alike, then the writer has defiance in his writing. What does it mean? Let's ask Cyrus. Yes, Cyrus Brocha. During the lockdown, Cyrus and I chatted on Instagram Live. He has this defiant handwriting stroke in his writing, and this is how he describes his behavior. You do not like people being authoritative for the heck of it.
Oh, I hate authority.
Yeah.
I hate, you're right, spot on.
Only because it is told that you must
because
do
they're
it,
telling
you
me
have
what
to do it.
Yeah,
you have to do
exactly.
No, but
I can't
agree.
stand authority.
I agree with you because it's not about what they're trying to say. Many a times you agree with what they're trying to say. It's only because the way it is said. And if you see anybody being arrogant, anybody being...
absolutely.
Then
it's
you
like
go
you knew me
for
all
a
my
kill.
life. With authority, I'm a big fan of Tamiz culture. If they speak nicely to me, I'll do anything they say. But we just don't do that. Nobody, the cop will just tell you, they don't, just talk nicely. But anyway, I've given up on that. But I don't like authority, no.
Yes, and that has also led your career decisions and your many, many choices in life. You knew people are going to be irritating and they're going to be arrogant. And you have gotten into projects. Halfway through, you realize people are being authoritative and you've stepped out.
Right.
And sometimes you just walk out without saying anything and you just withdraw in the middle of a conversation because you're like, no point. I'm going to lose my mind. I might as well protect them from me. So I might as well walk out. So
not just walking out, but more often I start teasing them and it becomes confrontational after some time because I start behaving like a 5-year-old and making silly comments and undermining their authority and, making fun of calling them by their first name. Sometimes, that irritates people when they're in authority around other people. I have lots of techniques.
And he's right. Being in the position of authority does not make anyone right, let alone righteous. Writers with this style of K start defending themselves without any reason. They rebel without a cause. They feel bullied by someone in command. And working under a boss who is arrogant or authoritative is their biggest challenge. Instead of being calm and composed in a situation like this, when they're getting triggered, they either aggravate the issue by teasing the authorities further, in the way Cyrus described it, quietly walk away from the situation, just withdrawing in the middle of it, or say things like go to hell and leave. All of them are counterproductive. In Marathi, there is a phrase, arela kare mhanna. So when somebody says are in a rude tone, instead of understanding why this person is being rude, you just say kare and just get into a fight. If your child has this stroke, then he or she cannot follow rules without getting irritated. If your subordinate has this stroke, then make sure that you be gentle and respectful while giving instruction to this person. If your spouse shows this stroke, then make sure that you do not use words like must, should, have to. For example, you cannot say things like you have to do the dishes or you should come with me to this party. That is just the beginning of a big fight there. I have mentioned this stroke and some other instructions about how to identify it in today's fun sheet. Download it from the website link aditisurana.com/podcast. Look for episode number 83. Now the question is, what do you do if you have the stroke in your own handwriting? You know that you get irritated every now and then when people are rude to you, and the remote control of your own behavior lies in the hands of others. On this week's Friday episode, let me talk about this topic in detail and come up with ways in which you can deal with it. Till then, you can think about all the questions that you can ask me and do send it to me on my Instagram handle @Aditi Surana. Thank you so much for joining me today. If this episode has impacted you in any way, then be the first one to create that impact on others. Look at someone's handwriting, look for the defiant stroke, and find ways in which you can help them. Every month I teach one Graphology masterclass. It is designed for every participant to know themselves at a deeper level. As you can tell, it's a great way to detect anxiety patterns, all your challenges with yourself, understand your kids, and hire better. Our next batch begins on Saturday, 9th of Jan. All the details are mentioned on the website aditisurana.com. If you like this podcast, then don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Let's connect on Friday with our Defiance discussion. Till then, happy writing!
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shanetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show, Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
and sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.
Feeling overwhelmed, anxious, struggling with too many obstacles, don't know where your life is headed? Well, if you are dealing with one or all of these, tune into the Positively Unlimited podcast, because in each episode, I share a life lesson, a life hack, a pro tip that can help you get your life back on track. All episodes are available on the IVM website, IVM Podcast app, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts from.